This from Aaron to open up the show. Aaron writes, Kevin, I'm a lifelong Seattle fan and also a fan of yours. Been listening for the last 10 years since moving to the DMV. I have to disagree with you saying that the Eagles were a better team than Seattle this year. Your own favorite DVOA has this year's Seahawks as the fourth best team in NFL history. It's true. Seattle, per Aaron Schatz's DVOA, combined regular season and playoffs, number 4 on the list, behind number 1, the 91 Skins, number 2, the 85 Bears, and number 3, the 2007 Patriots. And Aaron, I'll answer that here in a minute or two, or less than that, actually. If you missed Wizards GM Will Dawkins on the show yesterday, I thought he was really good. I've actually enjoyed having him on the show the 3 or 4 times he's been on since becoming the GM. I think they're doing a really good job. I really do. Like, I don't want to, start the chess versus checkers, the whole Adam Peters, let him eat thing. Let's see how this all plays out. But I think the process has been a good one. And I think they've been on the right side of a lot of these deals in the moment. It's easy in hindsight to go back and say, man, they shouldn't have done that deal. They should have kept those 2 first-round picks, even though they were super late and super protected, because Anthony Davis played 12 games for them. What were they doing? And the other 4 guys they got, 2 of them never played, because they shipped him out, and the other guy really wasn't very good at all. But in the moment is really how you have to value these trades, is based on the context of the trade, the time, etc. Did they get a good deal? I mean, it seems strange that Anthony Davis could be available for what the Wizards gave up. I think they went in and swooped up an unbelievable talent for literally, like I said last week, a bag of nickels. So I like the deal. I like what they're doing. It's like, for me, fingers crossed, praying that I want the Wizards to compete for an NBA championship legitimately before I die. Like that, of course, I want the Skins to be, back, by the way, in their old uniforms with the old logo and the old name, of course. But I really, benefit much more so by their success, and I would like to see it, and I'd certainly like Jaden Daniels to lead it. But, man, I would love it if sometime before I'm long gone, in June, I can sit down and, by the way, on NBC now, the NBA Finals, and watch the Wizards, face the Lakers or the Oklahoma City Thunder or the San Antonio Spurs in a 7-game NBA Finals. The NFL dwarfs everything in this country. We understand that. College football does. I mean, all of these other things we talk about are so niche compared to football in general. I love basketball. And I love the Bullets/Wizards, and I would love to see what this town would do. I know I would be totally into it. Will said this, and he knows I know this, and I think most people who are from here and have lived here a long time know this. This is really a basketball city. Its heart is in basketball. Now, its eyeballs during the fall, it's all about football. And the football team is number 1 by miles in this market. But in terms of being involved personally, being interested personally, basketball's always been a big deal from, the youth level through obviously the college level, with the success that Maryland and Georgetown have had in particular over a long period of time, not necessarily this year, although Georgetown's played better. And man, the game they played against Villanova, we didn't talk about it on Monday because it was Super Bowl Monday, Max, but that game against Villanova was really good. The Hoyas are much better since that big kid came back. I watched that game, and that big kid's good. I forget his name, but they're a different team with him. If they had won that game, Georgetown would have legitimately been back into the conversation of maybe making a run for the tournament. Seriously, they needed to win that game, though, I think. But for me, man, you line them up, Skins, Super Bowl, Maryland, Final Four championship, and then Wizards. And after that, I mean, it's a several space countdown to get to what's next for me. And I think it would be amazing. Think about what the town did for the Nats and the Caps, and now try to put, the Wizards with all of the people in this town, and it's a much bigger audience for basketball if they were really into it. I think they would be. I mean, I felt like the Wizards have been the sleeping giant for decades, and maybe that sleeping giant is asleep permanently. Who knows? Because people just haven't, adopted them, their hometown team, as their team. But getting good always helps. They got a good result last night. The Pacers shocked the Knicks. That was what we were looking for, Max. So that's a good result for the Wizards. The Pacers, I think, got their 14th win. That's where the Wizards are right now. So keeping track of them, needing to finish in the bottom four, they have done pretty well not playing here recently. Will Dawkins, if you missed him, we'll play that back or some of that back for you this hour. The coordinators talked yesterday. I watched Quinn. I watched Durante Jones, and I watched Blau. Watched the entirety of all three. And so we'll play some of the highlighted cuts. I'm going to tell you right now, from my standpoint, there weren't a lot of them. I had Max cut it up, so I'm interested to see what Max actually cut up. I know that the one area in which we're going to talk about is what Quinn said and what Blau said about the offensive, philosophical changes, scheme changes. But for the most part, I thought Durante Jones, super impressive, super comfortable. David Blau, super, impressive, very XC and OE, but, and not a hell of a lot of personality, but who cares? But I liked both of them first blush. Of course, none of that means anything until September 13th, Sunday, afternoon, 1:00 in their opener against the Giants and John Harbaugh at home. That's my prediction right now. Subject to change. We'll see when we get to the mock schedule. So, Aaron's a lifelong Seattle fan, and Aaron, you're correct. Seattle, one of the all-time great teams per Aaron Schatz's DVOA metric. It's interesting because I follow Aaron on social media, and he's been doing a lot of defending Seattle's position on his list. And he doesn't need to. That team was awesome this year. They were. I didn't really say that Philadelphia was a better team. I said that Philadelphia's defense was better than Seattle's defense, but acknowledging that Seattle's defense was unbelievably good. Great, actually. But what the Rams did to Seattle's defense twice over the final 5 weeks of the season into the postseason through the NFC Championship game. I mean, the only team that legitimately could move the football against Philadelphia were the Rams in the snow in the divisional round playoff game late in the game, and Washington twice. Washington turned the ball over 5 times against that Philadelphia defense in late December of 2024 and still won the game 36-33. I mean, what Washington was offensively, let's be clear about this. 2024, fully healthy, they were an elite offensive football team, and their results against Philadelphia really are more than enough proof, given what Philadelphia did to everybody else. With that said, what Washington did to Philadelphia isn't really what the Rams did to Seattle. The Rams carved up Seattle in a way that Washington didn't necessarily carve up Philly. The yardage, numbers were much higher. The points in aggregate were much greater. The third down conversions weren't as good. Washington was really good on third down against Philadelphia. But I thought that Philadelphia's performance in the postseason down the stretch, with the exception of the games against Washington and with the exception of the Rams kind of fourth quarter with the snow-covered field, which made a difference because the Rams didn't do a lot until that fourth quarter or that second half when they started, gaining yards. It was a close football game. I'm not saying it wasn't a close football game and competitive football game, but it wasn't like the Rams were, carving up Philadelphia in that first half. And the snow came, and that's when they really started to gain yardage. But what the Rams did to Seattle's defense and what Matt Stafford did to Seattle's defense in 2 games late in the season. I mean, again, I've said this a number of times. You almost have to, on the face of it, say, well, that can't be right, Sheehan. You don't have those numbers correct. That's not right. But it is. Matt Stafford, in 2 games against the Seahawks, down the stretch, threw for 831 yards. 831 yards and 6 touchdowns. In the game in week 16 on Thursday Night Football, he threw for 457 yards against that Seattle defense, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, no sacks. And then in the NFC Championship game, he threw for 374 more and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 1 sack. He had an 82.8 QBR against Seattle in the NFC title game and an 89.6 QBR in that Thursday night game. Now, his team didn't win either game. They should have won clearly the Thursday night game. They had a 30-14 lead in the fourth quarter. And Rashid Shaheed's punt return, it's funny because for all the, moaning and groaning about Al Michaels on Thursday Night Football, and I'm with you guys, he's not the same Al Michaels anymore. But Al Michaels said late in that game, Rashid Shaheed's punt return in the fourth quarter, down 30-14 for a touchdown, may have determined the NFC entrant into the Super Bowl. He was right, because the game would have been played at SoFi. Seattle would have had to play 3 instead of 2 games. The Rams would have had just 2. Now, we would have ended up with a phenomenal NFC Championship game, even if it was Seattle at Rams in that title game. But the Rams had them dead to right. And it was special teams that cost them in that game, that punt return, and cost them in the NFC title game with the muffed punt. The 2 special teams plays probably this season determined the Super Bowl winner between Seattle and the Rams. Fine line league, man. It is a fine line league. Always has been. I think it's always going to be that way. With that said, I do think that this year there was separation between these 2 teams and whomever was number 3 in the league, whichever team was number 3. But to me, Philadelphia, I'm sorry, that defense last year, coached by Vic Fangio, I don't think that they give up 831 yards on a normal playing field against Matt Stafford and the Rams. Stafford's numbers in that playoff game, he did throw for 324 and 2 touchdowns. He did. And his QBR, though, overall was 49.7 in that game. He was 26 of 44, a 59.1% completion percentage. And I think Philly's performance in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes, and yeah, the Chiefs' offensive line was a mess, and that was a part of it. But they didn't cross midfield until late in the third quarter. And just like Super Bowl Sunday just passed, last year's final numbers in that Super Bowl were not reflective of the dominance. I mean, did you know that the Patriots had 331 yards in the game and Seattle had 335 yards? That Seattle had 20 first downs, New England had 18. I mean, nobody watched that game and would have thought that the actual final numbers would have been that close. And it's because the fourth quarter was total garbage time football, with the Patriots, with the Seahawks playing soft and the Patriots gobbling up yardage and even some points in the fourth quarter after they were down 19-0. That game was so long gone over when the Patriots started gobbling up some yards and some points. Now, it felt like in the moment, what are you doing, Vrabel? Go for 2 when it's 19-6. Still doesn't make any sense why he kicked the extra point there. But they weren't going to win the football game. Not with that quarterback and that offense on that day. Just wasn't going to happen. But the stats look the same, and the Kansas City thing from last year kind of looks the same. But I actually think the beatdown of the Chiefs by the Eagles defense was more impressive because it was Patrick Mahomes. And they weren't playing not to lose. The Chiefs weren't, they didn't employ a game plan that said, we don't think your offense can beat us, so we're okay punting on 8 drives in a row. And that's what they did. 79 yards on 9 drives. You take out the kneel down at the end of the first half. 9 drives, 79 yards, 8 punts, and a fumble. That's what New England did against that Seattle defense. And the Chiefs, same thing, didn't cross midfield until late in the third quarter. But those are the Chiefs, and that was Patrick Mahomes. These were the Patriots with Drake May, all due respect intended, because he was really good in the regular season. He just was brutally terrible in the postseason. Give me Jaden. I love the Drake May people. God, that was a rough 4-week stretch, wasn't it, for them? Max, rough 4 weeks.
It was, but that's the other side of it is like you could also say he's been winning games, but he was not the main factor in winning those games. Yeah. Still won them, though. He was the starting
quarterback on teams that won games.
Exactly.
3 of them. That's what he was.
Exactly.
He was definitely that. I'm just, honestly, for you Drake May people, I'm having more fun with you because you guys were so declarative and so definitive that this guy, wow, your team, Sheehan, made the biggest mistake. Our team, Kevin, made the biggest mistake. And it's like, yeah, he's good, and I still think he's good. I do. I was blown away impressed with how good he looked this year, and I think he's going to be an outstanding quarterback. He's a second-year quarterback. You cannot take these 4 games and say that's who he's going to be when they face a much tougher schedule next year. I don't know. Maybe he will be. I think the only concern I'd have about Drake May is the nerves got the better of him. I mean, he was seeing ghosts in that game. That was not a good look for him in that particular game. But overall, I loved what I watched from Drake May. In all seriousness, I think he's got a tremendous future, and I think he's got a chance to be an elite-level quarterback in this league. But those that wanted to make him that based on the schedule he faced and immediately call it over in terms of Jaden versus Drake, that had to be a tough 4-week stretch of watching him play quarterback, because that was truly one of the worst postseasons we've ever seen a quarterback play. And I think I said this yesterday or the day before. I understand it's a regular season award. The postseason has nothing to do with it. But man, had he won the MVP, it'd look really bad right now. It would look really bad. I mean, Matt Stafford throws for 831 and 6 touchdowns against that defense, and Drake May literally drops back and falls down because he's seeing ghosts and, the whole thing. That would have not been a great look for NFL MVP voters. And there were 23 first-place Drake May voters. Again, I understand. You're not voting on the postseason. You voted for this before you saw him in the postseason. And at the end of the regular season, man, he was humming. I mean, he had it going on. I mean, those games against the Jets and the Dolphins and the Giants, he was just killing it. Drake May was murdering some of these teams this year. I mean, the Jets twice, the Dolphins twice, the Giants, the Bengals, the Browns. They played the Browns. They played the Saints. They played the Panthers. Well, the Panthers did end up in the postseason. There was that. He actually had one of his, I think it was the first game where it was like, yeah, he's getting better, because he had not played well against the Steelers in week 3, and they were 1-2. And then it was the Carolina game in week 4. He got on a roll, man. I mean, he was completing like 80% plus of his passes. Now, it was Carolina, Buffalo, New Orleans, Tennessee, Cleveland, Atlanta, the Jets, Cincinnati, the Giants. But he's a good quarterback. He really is. I like him. I like him a lot. Like, if you told me we didn't have Jaden Daniels and who would you take? I think I'd probably take Drake May. It'd be close with Caleb Williams, but I think I'd take Drake May next. If I'm redrafting 2024, Jaden 1, whew, man, it's tough.
Ooh.
Caleb is such a playmaker, isn't he?
He does, but he makes the hard stuff look easy and the easy stuff look hard.
He does. But you know what? Can you coach up accuracy? I don't know if you can.
That's the big question. People have been trying to do it for years now.
And Drake, even though he was not, accurate in the postseason, he is an accurate passer. He can really throw the football. But Caleb, for this day and age, the playmaking, the off schedule, the speed he has is second to Jaden's out of that class. He's faster than all the other ones. He's a better off schedule quarterback than all of the other guys except for Jaden. He might be better than Jaden as an off schedule quarterback.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. Given the body of work that I've seen very recently, I'm willing to hear out the conversation. That's for sure.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who just all year just dogged me with Drake May talk.
Oh boy.
Now he's a Patriots guy.
That makes more sense.
He moved down here from Norwood, Mass, which is a suburb of Boston, many years ago. And he was so fired up. And all year long, he's like, see what he did? You see what he did? I'm like, yeah, congrats. You beat the Jets again. You beat the Dolphins again. But I succumbed. I'm like, I like him. He's good. Like, there's no doubt he's good. But I'm not trading my guy for him.
No.
Not yet. Crickets. Since
Sunday. Since this week. It's been a quiet week.
There were crickets after the Houston game, because remember, that was the game in which he had, what did he have? 4 fumbles in that game, lost 2 of them.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of the all-time, lowlights for a quarterback in this postseason, more turnovers, more sacks, etc. You can coach him out of that stuff, though. He's got what you need your quarterback to have. He's got the arm. He's got the size. He's got the off-schedule ability. He's got the touch. He's got the feel. Apparently, the mental makeup is off the charts. The teammate stuff, the character stuff, off the charts. To me, the only thing that would concern me about Drake May is I thought he held the ball too long during the regular season at times and didn't see it as quickly. And then the nerves and the sort of almost fear that he played with in the Super Bowl was not a good look. You would have loved to have seen him go down like, I'm getting out of the pocket. They can't protect. I'm making a play with my legs. I'm rushing for 90 yards in this game. He had 37 yards rushing on 5 carries. I know. He got a shot for pain in his shoulder from the hit he took late in that Denver game. All right.
Said he was fine all 2 weeks.
What'd you say?
Said he was fine the entire 2 weeks leading up to it, so.
Yeah. Who do they what's their schedule next year? I mean, they're
playing a first place schedule, so it's going to be tough.
I know, but it always looks tough, but like we say every year, it's like, okay, but it might not be, depending on who's good and who isn't. It's hard to know. But they have, so the home games they have home games with the division teams, the Bills, Jets, and Dolphins. And they have a home game with Denver, Raiders, Packers, Vikings, Steelers. Away the division teams, and then away at Chicago, away at Detroit. Ooh, I'm going to make a call right now. New England at Detroit, Thanksgiving Day.
Ooh.
That seems like a pretty good
I like that call.
Thanksgiving Day matchup.
It does.
Ooh, at KC, at Chargers, at Seahawks. We talked about that they're one of the opponents for Seattle. You could get that in the Thursday night opener. And at Jacksonville. So that is right now.
Murderers Row.
Again, we don't know really. But at Chicago, at Detroit, at KC, at Chargers, at Seahawks, at Jacksonville. That's not at Jets, at Giants, at Cleveland, at Carolina.
All playoff teams outside of Kansas City and, the Jets and Dolphins.
Chiefs will be back next year. Don't
They
you
better
think somehow, some way?
I mean, yeah, it's Mahomes. I'm never going to doubt him until his leg falls off.
I think that I really think that Jacksonville-Buffalo game, I've referenced it several times in Wild Card Weekend. I think if Jacksonville had hung on and won that game,
they
were good enough to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the way they were playing at the end of the year, man.
I think it was Seattle's year because, like, Jacksonville gives me Seahawks light vibes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But at the end of the year, they were a swarming defensive team.
Mm-hmm. They were walling.
But again, like this fine line, like I said, Shaheed's punt return Thursday night, week 16, and the muffed punt, two special teams, gaffes or good plays, but one of them was a gaff. The Rams' special teams this year probably cost them a Super Bowl. Kotwiko was the guy that Sean brought in late in the year. So he was there for, I think he actually was brought in after that first Seattle game. Is that when Sean made the special teams coaching change? I think it may have been. All right. I want, for those of you, that missed it, Will Dawkins was really good. We're going to play some of that back for you next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Last week for the Wizards, it was active. It included a big surprise, a trade for Anthony Davis that really surprised everybody. And now, all of a sudden, the team has added 2 All-Stars in Davis and Trae Young. And next year's outlook is different. Joining me right now is Wizards general manager Will Dawkins. Will, first of all, thanks for making time for me. Much appreciated. Sometimes big trades are in the works for a while, and sometimes they come out of nowhere. Describe the Anthony Davis trade.
Hey, good afternoon, Kev. Thank you for having me. Like you said, each trade deadline is different. This one, we got active early with the Trae Young trade and had to kind of reassess where we were at, look at our finances for the offseason and what we could do in the trade deadline. And we got together our strategy group and basically were like, these are the tools we want to use to improve the team. This is kind of the wish list, and we don't want to go above our price. Let's go around the league and just canvas the league and see what we can get. And towards that last week, it got a little bit more competitive, I guess, for prices and markets. And at the end of the day, it sped up pretty quickly towards the end, and we were very happy to go shopping and come away with a guy like Anthony Davis.
But did it speed up specifically with Anthony Davis? Was that an 11th hour kind of add to the strategy that you had decided on, or was that in the works for a week or two?
Yeah, I think it got more real within like a 48-hour type thing. It became more of a pie in the sky idea to actually having conversations with the team. But again, each thing goes quickly and differently, and this one kind of came together sooner than most.
When you made the move for Davis, I'm assuming, you made the case and you've got to pitch, Michael Winger, Ted. Can you describe just, in sort of highlight form, the pitch you made to make that trade?
Yeah. I think the best part I've learned about working here at Monumental is you have an opportunity to do your job. And Michael and I made this decision, just us, to improve the team. And it was based off our younger players and our belief in them as people, our belief in them as workers, and the step that they're going to take at the end of the season, into the summer, into next season. And we wanted to compete, or at least be in more competitive games. So for us, it was 2.5 years ago. Let's deconstruct this thing. I know it's difficult. It might be long. And we think we're through that deconstruction phase based on what we've been able to do right now. So it was a pretty easy sell that this is where we want to take the team and the direction of the team, and it was all basketball related.
What you just said is so interesting because I in talking about the trade last week, and I'll just tell you, I was very excited about it as a longtime Wizards fan. Obviously, I'm praying for health. I'm praying for the Anthony Davis that's healthy and plays like a top 5 to top 10 player and one of the best two-way players of his era. But one of the things I described, and I want you to get into it in more detail, is I said developing young players is hard when they're not playing meaningful games night in and night out. They're not playing games that matter in the standings. Maybe the opponent comes in and isn't as, intent on the game and is focused on the game. Is that what you were saying, that you're making the move so that these young players next year have a chance to develop in a completely different environment than the one they've been developing in?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head right there. I've been fortunate to be at other places, Michael Winger and Travis Schlenk as well, where we have been more competitive. And it's a different mindset when a team comes in to play you, when you're on national TV, when you're getting the opponent's best shot. And that's what we want. We think you grow most through the fire. And again, it's a testament to our scouting department to be able to draft and our coaches to be able to develop these players to that point where we feel like we want to throw them in there, be in more competitive games. And I think you'll see a growth that you normally can't see based on how we've been performing the last few years.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me. We're talking to Michael Winger. No, we're talking to Will Dawkins, the general manager. I think everybody wants to know, the Wizards fans want to know, first of all, because there is a real understanding of the draft protection ramifications of, winning too many games this year. I think you had mentioned to me the last time you were on that the 2026 draft was very interesting, I think is what you said. Will they play this year? Will Anthony Davis and Trae Young play in games this year? And if so, how many do you think?
That's the plan. We want to get them on the court and give them opportunities to play with their new teammates, make sure we can adjust and see what we have. We still kept a little flexibility going into the summer to add to the team. Obviously, we'll be able to add in free agency, and hopefully we'll be able to add through draft and have some luck on lottery night. But, yeah, the plan right now is to get both of them healthy. I think Trey's trending a little further ahead right now, where we'll be able to get an update through All-Star break. And then Anthony is still rehabbing. He has a doctor's visit All-Star weekend, and we'll get a better feel for his diagnosis and how far out he is. But our doctors, our medical team are high level. They're on it. And the goal is to get these guys on the court and speed up their RTP so that they can return and play with their teammates. But
Will, how do you
want to make sure they're
manage
100% healthy first?
Yeah. How do you manage this as a general manager? And let me mention for people that haven't paid attention to it, the Wizards have a draft pick that's protected top 8. It's a loaded 2026 draft. If they finish in the bottom 4, they're guaranteed to be in the top 8. If they finish outside the bottom 4, there is a risk that they could potentially lose this first round pick. How do you manage this as a general manager, as an organization?
Yeah, it's not at the forefront of our thinking. I think the forefront of what we're trying to do this year, and I spoke about it at the beginning of the year, is player development and full roster player development. We were loaded on the wings, and we just want to be able to see guys play, give them opportunities so that we can make decisions at the end of the year on where we need to go, who needs to stay, moves we need to make. So I think we've done a pretty good job of developing the entire roster. And even the last 4 games or the last 8 games, I think we've won 4 of them. We've been 500. So we're playing competitive basketball while we're giving players like Jameer Watkins, Will Riley, Sharif, Cooper more opportunities. So for us, we got to make sure that we answer the questions we need to have on our young players, our young nucleus, find out who the guys we're going to move forward with. And that's probably the priority for the rest of the season. But we do know how deep the draft is, and we feel pretty confident we'll get a good player no matter where we're at.
Hopefully we get some draft lottery luck this year. I mean, we need it once and for all. But I would imagine, like last night, the Wizards didn't play. But you know this. It was a good night, wasn't it?
Good night when we don't play and everybody's healthy, for sure. We're getting back closer to health.
Yeah, Utah, the Nets, and New Orleans, all won games last night, which was all good for the Wizards. Tell me how you envision Trae Young and Anthony Davis playing together offensively.
Yeah, I think when we looked at our roster and kind of where we were at, we wanted to add some support at the point guard position and at the power forward position. And first, these guys are just going to come in as leaders of the team. We've always tried to surround our young players with veterans. I think year 1, it was Tyus at the point, Gallo at the 4. Year 2, we threw Valanciunas out there, Malcolm Brogdon out there, a little bit of Marcus Smart midway through the season. So we've always tried to have like anchors that have some ability to give them experience. And I think this time, adding Trae and adding Anthony Davis, we're amplifying the talent that's on the floor with them. So we're hopefully getting a little bit more out of everybody. And I think specifically to your question, how Anthony and Trae are going to play well, I don't think Trae's played with a player to the level of Anthony Davis while accomplishing the highest assist percentage. He just makes the game easier for a lot of people. So I think it's going to be great on that end. Anthony Davis probably hasn't played with a passing point guard this level. I don't know, maybe since Rondo would probably be the closest. But you can just see the lob opportunities, the 2-man game. But those guys are closers. They close games. Our young players are getting better closing games, getting better competing through without. And you can throw it down to Anthony Davis on the block, command the double team, swing the ball, and we have a lot of shooters ready to make plays. And that's how we want to play, with multiple guys making decisions and having size and length defensively behind Trae. And having Alex Sarr and Anthony Davis next to each other at the rim is pretty difficult, we hope, for other teams, as well as having Bilal and Keyshawn and our other defenders like Jameer on the wing pressing up into the ball. It allows Trae to get into the ball and force those guys to make tough decisions and finish over length, no matter who you're going after.
I'll tell you what, you just went through the whole description, and it really is so intriguing and exciting. And the thought of it and watching it, beginning next year in games in which the team's really trying to go out there and win 40, 45 games is exciting. Obviously, Anthony Davis's health is everything. You mentioned Rondo. The big difference, of course, is you could go underneath every single Rondo screen with Anthony Davis. You can't do that with Trae Young.
No, we're going to be able to spread the floor. Obviously, Trae will have the ball in his hands a good amount, but when you have other Trey Johnson, Bub Carrington, Keyshawn, all those guys can play on the ball and space the floor, it makes it hard for the defense. So again, we'll get each other together and get them in the room and try to figure out the best offense moving forward. But we want multiple decision makers. We want guys who can space the floor and make decisions and make it tough for the other team to know what we're trying to do. And I think we've added the right people to be able to do that. And hopefully we add another young talent in this year's draft to kind of push that core group of young players, that nucleus forward. Because like we said, we want sustained success, not a little quick bite in the apple. So we're trying to grow this thing right now and just take those next steps from deconstruction to competing a little bit more.
Do you see Sarr as a stretch four? Like, I'm looking at his 3-point percentage, shooting percentage right now. But when I watch him shoot, I see a good stroke that it wouldn't surprise me if that continues to become a higher percentage from behind the arc. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah. Alex is really, really talented. I think his playmaking is a little underrated just because he does so many other things at the rim on both ends at a high level. But his playmaking, his feel, his spacing, I think he finished the last 35 games last year a little above 35%. He's hovered around that again from 3 this year. So the reps, the timing, having more spacing, better passing, better ball handlers around him, I think he's going to get more open shots. And he works. If you come in here and look at the stats of who's shooting the most, he's up there on the team. And he's going to have another big summer and take another jump. So I wouldn't say he's a stretch big. He's just a talented offensive player that can do a lot of things, with shooting being one of them.
We're talking to Will Dawkins, the Wizards GM. Tell me the difference between a 3-point shooter, but then a 3-point shooter who can really extend it to 30 feet plus, and how that impacts an offense and how defenses have to defend that.
Yeah, the gravity that Trey Johnson, at a rookie, has already
exactly
gotten the reputation for, next to the gravity that obviously Trey Young shooting from the logo is nothing new to him as well. That just pulls the defense out. It gives our bigs a lot more spacing. It forces rotations 1, 2, 3, 4 feet further, which makes the closeout that much longer. And you're able to get our shooters in the corners easier shots, and they're less contested shots. So spacing the floor, shooting in this game, I know it's really changed over the last 10 years, but even more so the last 5 years. So having dynamic guys who can space the floor, and even at practice, we have a 4-point line that's about 4 or 5 feet beforehand, just so our guys are working on it. And it's just changed the way you're able to play on offense. But again, I think the most important thing outside of shooting is quick decisions. Everyone gets 24 seconds. Those that can process and make good reads and maximize those 24 seconds usually has the best offenses in the league.
Isn't that where Steph really changed the game, Will? Is it wasn't the 3-point shooting. It was the fact that it was from 28 feet and out that he was shooting those threes, and it changed the dimensions of the floor defensively.
Yeah, I think he's going to go down as someone that changed basketball, not just in the NBA. I think if you talk to Trey Young, he'll tell you he saw it and started doing it in high school and then changed the way they were playing in college. I was in Oklahoma working at the time and got to see him play a ton, and he was coming up, pulling and doing the same things. And unfortunately, my son's 9 years old playing AAU now, and you see guys doing it already at that age. So
right.
The game has changed for sure.
Well, I've talked a lot about this over the years because, you go back 25 years and something, at the logo wasn't a jump shot. It was more of a heave, it was more of a chuck. And now everybody's shooting jump shots from half court. How did that change? They just started shooting them, wrists, legs, the whole thing just got stronger, right?
Yeah, I think it's also the repetition. Those shots you weren't practicing, so you really couldn't extend your range. But if you watch some of our coaches work with the players, they try to keep it as natural as a shot as possible. And when you reach your peak, we kind of don't want you to go in further. So guys work in the weight room, they work in the medical performance space to build themselves up. And some guys can do it very easily where it's a natural shot. And if your motion is the same, we encourage you to shoot it, because most shooters are, no matter the distance, as long as they can see the rim and get their normal mechanics off, you feel confident about it. So if guys are going to guard you right at 3-point line and you can space a little bit further, we encourage it. And I think Dwayne Wade and Miami Heat did a really good job of this with Mike Miller and Dwayne Wade when they won the finals, probably 2012-ish. And Dwayne Wade would run through the ball while he was spacing and really force the closeouts, while Mike Miller would space and hit those shots. So they kind of started it a little bit more. And then I think the Steph Curry's of the world in Golden State, when they added Durant, really just took it to another level of floor spacing, and now people have caught on.
So where do you have to pick up Trey Johnson? And next year and the year beyond, where will the scouting reports say you've got to pick up Trey Johnson and not let him get his feet set? At what point?
I don't want to give other teams the answer.
Yeah.
But he's confident enough that if he can see the rim, he feels he can get it through the net.
How pleasant of a surprise, or maybe I should just ask you, are you surprised with Will Riley's play this early?
Not surprised. Definitely proud and excited of the way he's kind of climbed. He's someone that we thought would be able to do this at some point in the NBA. But kudos to Coach Keefe and Coach Topper with the Go-Go, just having synergy. And when he's playing with their G League team, he's working on the things, not just to go out there and score, but that are going to be productive once he comes back with the Wizards. And he had some really impressive moments there. Our scouts did a really good job at the amateur level. They've been watching him since 9th, 10th grade, and he always had the ball in his hands. He just continued to grow, continued to get better. And then once they split him in the 6-man role and really let him play at Illinois towards the end of the year, you saw that point guard, ball type player come out, and he's got a lot of confidence. He is also one of the better workers on our team. So I think he's going to have a really big summer, kind of like Keyshawn, change his body and change his confidence and be able to come back and compete even more. But he's taking advantage of his opportunities, and we're really happy with where he's at.
I've paid a lot more attention here over the last, since football season ended. Tell me about Jameer Watkins. He gets after it on the defensive end.
Yeah. Again, another rookie who competes, gets after it. He has a physical profile because he's a little older than our normal rookies, that can stand in there and compete. And I think he gives people on the ball a lot of problems because he physically can take the hits, but he has really good hands. His deflections are top
incredible
on the team and just his minutes played. So if you can even maximize that per 36, they're outstanding. But it's really a mindset for him. And he's getting better on the offensive end as well. I kind of joked with him at the end of last game. I said, you had no pick six today. The last few games, you've just stripped someone at the middle of center court, took it in for a dunk. I was like, no pick six today. We got to get back to that. But just knowing how difficult that is in his mindset. So hopefully we'll see him a little bit more the second half of the season so he can build up his confidence into the summer as well.
In saying it the way you said it, sometimes there are really good defenders and sometimes there are just guys who anticipate really well and they take a lot of risks and they end up with high steal numbers, but they aren't necessarily your best defender. Am I right about that, A, and B, which of the two is Jameer?
Yes, you are right about that. I think you always look at the top steals leaders at the end of the season and you're like, well, that's like a small point guard who gambles or takes risk, but gets up with a lot of balls. The thing that we try to chart is deflections and rebounds, stocks, blocks. Those things matter. But what we chart isn't always the result. We chart effective field goal percentage. So the guy you're guarding, are you forcing him to take a lower probability shot on you than he would against other people? And both Jameer and Bilal are doing a really good job of that this year. Last time I looked, Bilal was almost 4% lower expected when he's guarding you on the top wings in the league. So those are what we look for because at the end of the day, the ball is going to go in or out. But if you're forcing them to take more difficult shots than normal, we're going to take those odds most days.
Can the same be said to a certain degree about shot blockers? That sometimes you lead the league, but sometimes you're not the best rebounder behind it or not the best defender behind it.
Yeah, it's really hard to be Dwight Howard, where you can lead the league in shot blocks and rebound.
Right.
He was probably one of one elite Superman for a reason, but guys who influence the paint are more important than anything. And again, defense is a tandem string. So if you have shot blockers that you can force into and have more ball pressure, that's better than not. And then as a team, we have to rebound. And we're fortunate that we have some really good rebounding guards to help Alex out while he's going out there. And I think he's still top 3 in blocks, but has also improved his rebounding percentage. So physically, he's going to figure it out. He's going to realize which guy I need to go protect, which guy I can actually stay home on. And he's gotten better at that. But now having Anthony Davis and Alex, both who average over 2 blocks a game typically, that's going to be special for us defensively on that back line.
All right. Last one for Will Dawkins. Fingers crossed everybody's healthy next year. And you come out with Anthony Davis and Trae Young and Alex Sarr and Trey Johnson and Bilal Coulibaly and all of the players that we've talked about. I'm sure you have a number in mind. I won't ask you to give me the number, but do you think that if all breaks right health-wise, that next year the Wizards are not only a lot better, but they're a playoff team? And I'm talking about inside the top 6.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely be more competitive night in and night out, and we'll see where that leads us. We're going to go day by day, game by game. But I think the goal will be to be a team that everybody feels every time they play us, and a resilient group that fights back every time we have an opportunity, and we'll learn how to close games. So over the course of the year, I think we'll be better towards the end than the beginning, and I'm excited to see where that leads us.
I also think, for whatever it's worth, there will be more juice, going into 2026, 2027 for a Wizards team since John and Bradley were playing together. Having an Anthony Davis, Trae Young combo, healthy, all right, again, fingers crossed, with all of the young stars, that would be, people will be paying attention for the first time in a while. That's got to be exciting too, right?
Definitely exciting, but I do want to give our fans some credit. They've had some really good moments this year supporting the group that we have, and their confidence and their belief in the young guys, I think, is why they're so excited to add 2 Hall of Famer or 2 all-star level players, because they know we have a good thing going on with our young guys, that it's going to take some time to put it all together. But they've been great. It's a basketball city, as you know. Like, they're clamoring to support, but I feel like they've been doing a really good job getting behind our guys, and they want to support the young guys just like the guys we've added. And hopefully we'll add 1 or 2 more to the team and continue with the phase we're in.
Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. Really exciting last week, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. Always fun to connect. Have a good day.
Yep. Will Dawkins. That was Will Dawkins from yesterday late in the show. Enjoyed it with him and excited about next year. Excited about the possibility of getting some draft lottery luck. Let's hope that happens. When we come back, we will get to what was coordinator press conference day. We'll give you the highlights of Durante Jones and David Blau and a little bit of Dan Quinn as well. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
those are conversations we have all year long about where it goes, and I've got tons of respect for both Cliff and for Joe, what they do, how they go about it. These guys worked incredibly hard over the 2 years here, so I thought it was time for change, a new vision of how we'd want to go about it, John, and so that's what we did.
Dan Quinn yesterday during a press conference in which Dan took questions for about 20 or so minutes, and then it was Durante Jones, the defensive coordinator, and they finished up with David Blau. Look, net, it was interesting, certainly, to hear from the two coordinators. Quinn does a really good job and has all season long, and it's not the Beats' fault at all, because they do try, but he's good at not answering the questions directly on several occasions and kind of talking around it and kind of leaving out some of the detail maybe behind some of the reasons behind Cliff and the team parting ways. But there was a lot there overall volume-wise, but I don't know, 7-8 cuts that I want to play for everybody from all three of them. There was the discussion from Dan Quinn about, the difference you'll see in the offense with David Blau and what he was looking for. And he talked about more, under center. He talked about more marrying of run to pass, and the pass being more play action. Passes, because that's where there were two things where Washington was way below the league, over the last 2 years. Number one, under center snaps. Number two, play action pass attempts. Under center, dead last by miles. We talked about that during the course of the year, this year in particular. And let me just say this, as it relates to Marcus Mariota, who played a lot more than Jaden did this year. I don't know that Marcus Mariota would have been, had they wanted to go to more under center, like they did with Josh a little bit in the last couple of games, Josh Johnson. I don't know if that would have been very good for Mariota. Mariota was the perfect fit for the Kingsbury sort of approach. I'm not sure he's played better during the course of his career than he did in some of the games as Washington's starter this year. I think Jaden can do everything well. I definitely think he can do everything well. But Max, which DQ cut is the one where he talks about under center snaps and more run to pass attempts, marrying run and pass? I'm looking at the rundown that you just sent me.
Let's try 18, his vision for the offense. I believe
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it'll look different JP, in some ways, as we're still kind of building some of the things together, but this is going to be like an aggressive, balanced attack, but like that will probably have more under center than we have in the past. That's also for run action and play passes to generate explosive plays. And so we're going to try to feature every part of Jaden in the way that makes him unique and special. But also the run action and the runs and the play action game that goes with it. Those are all things to generate explosive plays. I think, as like David was speaking on earlier, when we're here a year from now and we talk about generating the explosive plays, those are a few of the things that's going to come to mind when we're talking about our offense.
I mean, I think we all had a sense that was the reason that Dan Quinn wanted to move on from Cliff Kingsbury. And it was just in that press conference yesterday, very much confirmed. Again, like, there are a couple of things about sort of under center. To me, the under center part of the conversation, I'm not diminishing its importance, but I think the part that's so much more important is envisioning Jaden Daniels as a play-action passer, a play-action bootleg quarterback out on the edge, what they call QB keepers in the Shanahan, sort of jargon. And that to me is Shanahan style football, Ben Johnson style football to a certain degree, where there's just a lot of you look like you're running it, and all of a sudden the quarterback pulls it, And now we've sucked up, the second level of the defense, and we've got big behind that second level explosive opportunity with the play action pass. Washington was 20th in play action pass attempts in 2024 and 27th in play action pass attempts in 2025. And I think that that's the part that was missing, not to mention the fact that play action, sometimes even when you're not running the ball effectively, it just works and it's protective of the quarterback. And it gives the quarterback ample opportunity to see bigger holes behind that second level of the defense. And to Quinn's point, big explosive plays. And imagine, you get a run game married to that pass game, and you're lined up and you look like run, and you look like inside zone or outside zone run, and everybody's sucked up because Chris Rodriguez is averaging 4.5, 5 yards a carry. And now you're going bootleg back the other way, with 1, 2, and 3 levels of potential throws. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 2. The third, that first level sometimes is fullback or tight end. Second level, receiver. Third level, receiver. But with Jaden's dynamic, speed and elusiveness on the edge after the whole defense is moving in the other direction, I mean, that's definitely stuff I would have loved to have seen more of the last 2 years. What they did with him worked offensively, clearly, in 2024, and even at times when they were a little bit healthy for the few games in 2025. But I've always preferred that style. I'm definitely more of a Shanahan style offense preference-wise, but there are lots of ways to do it. And I think one of the things about under center, Blau talked about it, and we'll get to some of Blau's sounds, some of his sound and some of his cuts. But there's the ability, to communicate better for the quarterback under center. It makes a lot of plays look the same from the snap, the start of the snap. And on play action from under center, more so than shotgun, when you turn your back to the defense on play action, the defense loses sight of the football. And I remember Cooley going through that 8, 9, 10 years ago, more than that now at this point. It's 2026, probably like 10 or 11 years ago on the show, and talking about, under center, it's so much harder for that second level and even that third level of defender because they lose sight of the football. So you're not sure if the quarterback has it or the running back has it, especially when the quarterback is very good as a ball handler in that play fake. And even when he hands the ball off and the back is turned, sometimes you're still not sure. Does the quarterback have it? Does the back have it? And there's a benefit there. Now, what Sean McVay would tell you, and what Zach Robinson in Atlanta and a few others will tell you, is that you actually gain that same advantage from the pistol with the back behind you, because the quarterback does turn his back in the pistol on the play fake, but not in the shotgun, where any sort of play fake is with the ball exposed on sort of the mesh, fake handoff or give. Now, shotgun and pistol give you a much better opportunity in the RPO game than under center, but you can still run RPO under center. RPO meaning run pass option. That's not zone read. They're different. The run pass option is, I'm seeing that the corners are playing 10 yards off my receiver, and even though a run was called or it was an RPO, but the first part of a run PO is run. All right, I'm pulling it and I'm throwing it out to the receiver, because we can get 6, 7 yards that way as easy as we can get, 6 or 7 yards if I hand it off to the running back. And the zone read is really 2 run options, right? Either the running back or the quarterback keeping it. Now, you can mesh both of those concepts together, but we'll save that for another day. I think we've covered it before. But under center snaps in 2025, the reason that people really started to talk about under center this year, more so than last year, and I'll tell you why not so much last year, is this year, here were the top teams in under center snaps. By the way, keep in mind that only 2 of these teams were actually under center more than they weren't under center. The Rams led the league in under center snaps, and Chicago was second. Sean McVay, Ben Johnson. Shanahan tree, Ben Johnson. All right, then Seattle with Clint Kubiak, part of the Shanahan tree, was third. The Lions were fourth. That's an extension of Ben Johnson because they had Ben Johnson's offense. The 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, fifth. Then you had Buffalo, all right, with Joe Brady, Dallas, Patriots, Packers, Vikings, Texans, Jags. So out of the top 12 under center teams, 9 went to the playoffs. Last year, the least amount of under center teams like Washington and Kansas City and Philadelphia, they were in the final 4 of the postseason. Washington, Kansas City, and Philadelphia were top 5 in the fewest under center snaps in 2024, and they were in the final 4. They were 3 of the final 4 teams. The other one was Buffalo, who was more of an under center team. Kansas City beat Buffalo in that AFC title game in the 24 season. So these things can be cyclical. There are lots of different ways to have success offensively. Some of those ways include less under center snaps. But this year, we had a significant majority of the playoff teams be among the teams that led the league in under center snaps. And let me just once again emphasize this, because if you're thinking, oh, well, they're always under center. Actually, only the Rams and the Seahawks had more under center snaps than non-under center snaps. They just led the league, or 2 of the top 3, in under center snaps. Even the Bears and the 49ers and the Lions and the Bills and the Cowboys and the Patriots, who had a significant number of under center snaps, as a percentage of their overall offensive snaps, it was still less than 50%. So that means more than 50% of the time they were in pistol or shotgun. They weren't under center. But Washington's number was startling in 2025. They were at the bottom of the league with 17 total registered under center snaps. I got to tell you what, that number seems low to me, because I thought Josh Johnson himself may have had 17 under center snaps in the last 2 games. But they were at 17, and then second fewest was Kansas City at 45. So Washington had 28 fewer under center snaps than the 31st ranked team in under center snaps. And compared to the Los Angeles Rams, they were literally 234 under center snaps short of what the Rams did. Clearly, there are benefits to being under center, and clearly this was a big deal for Dan Quinn. I would say, though, that the number of under center snaps in Washington was near the bottom last year in 2024 as well. It was extreme this year because Marcus Mariota took the majority of snaps this year. He took more snaps at quarterback than anybody else did this year. And Marcus Mariota is much more comfortable in shotgun or pistol versus under center, or at least Cliff Kingsbury thought so. Because if Jaden had been the starter for 17 games, they may have still been near the bottom of the league and maybe would have finished at the bottom of the league. But I think they would have had overall more under center snaps. But it still would have been, one of the fewest numbers in the league. But I think the fact that Marcus Mariota started the majority of the snaps this year at quarterback is probably why they were so far at the bottom. But, is next year a year in which the under center teams have, instead of, actually it was in total, just so you know, of the top half of the league teams in under center snaps this year, they 11 of the 14 playoff teams. The 3 that were in the back half of the league, the Steelers, Panthers, and Eagles. Everybody else was in the top half of the league. So 12 of the 14 playoff teams this year were top half of the league in under center snaps. Last year, 3 of the final 4 were near the bottom in under center snaps. There are lots of ways to do this, guys. My preference is actually what the Rams do, what the Bears do, what the 49ers do. I'd prefer that, and I think Jaden's set up to have great success playing that way. I hope he realizes, and I'm sure that they can pitch him on the value of that. He was asked, Dan Quinn was, about, Jaden's, involvement in the process of moving on from Cliff and the elevation of David Blau. Here's what Quinn said.
To clarify, I also wanted to make sure I was also filling him in so he didn't hear externally, what and why. And we've got a good relationship in that way. So I wanted him to hear from me before he heard from anyone else, what we were doing and why we were doing it. And then the same thing on the hiring process of who and why. And so those are important things that I did want to have those conversations with him. He puts a lot into it, as you guys all know from being around him. And so I love getting his feedback. I love engaging with him. But as far as the vision of it, that had to come from me.
Yeah, I'm glad he said that, and I'm glad he sort of clarified that. I don't think any of us want to hear that Jaden Daniels made the decision on the offensive coordinator, or that they were so, we really involved Jaden in the process, and his input was very, very important. First of all, you should never do that to your young starting quarterback when the last guy's moving on because of the decision that you've made. You don't want the quarterback to be the reason why Kingsbury is gone. Actually, I think if the quarterback had truly had his way, I'm not sure Kingsbury would be gone. But yeah, a second-year player, and by the way, really a player with just 1 year of NFL experience at this point, because he played so little in 2025. Sorry, but that's what Dan Quinn gets paid for, those decisions. And they'll certainly take his feedback, as they should, when you have a quarterback of his talent level. And by the way, of his, I think, intellect and intuition. I think Jaden is very football savvy and smart. But you're certainly not going to let him make the decision. And even if he has a much more significant voice in it than maybe you would have thought going in, you don't publicize that. So I think that was a good job by the coach there. On Durante Jones, he was asked, about what Durante Jones, the new defensive coordinator, will bring from Minnesota's defense. Because I think, the idea was, okay, he's a Brian Flores disciple. Here's what the coach said.
Going through the hiring process, had a chance to visit with Brian and also with Durante. And so from a scheme standpoint, you learn a lot in these experiences, DA, because veteran coaches, this system, that system, how to go about it. Much like anything, the first thing I asked him to do when we got here, I want you to look at the players, but without talking to me first. I wanted you to have your own vision so there wasn't a bias. He can do this, he can do that, and let's find what they can do best. And when I'm talking to him, he's like the calm in the storm. I like that about Durante. I felt the teaching and what they can do, but we're also going to put people in the spots, where they can do best. And that, to me, really hit the main chord, DA, about what we're looking for. How do we feature players as opposed to can do this or can't do that? So let's start with what they can be exceptional at, and then find other ways to utilize them. And so pressuring and that package, that's definitely a part of it. But I'm excited, for these guys to go through it and learn it and build it together.
So then came the coordinators, Durante Jones and David Blau. And I'm going to play some of the key sound bites from both of them when we come back. I do want you to know right now that Window Nation's got a phenomenal deal going on through this month that if you've been thinking about new windows, you should consider taking advantage of it. It's buy 4 windows, get the next 4 free. They're adding an extra 10% discount for Valentine's Day. Not that you have to have the windows in by Valentine's Day. It's just a 10% Valentine's Day February discount. So you're already getting half price with the buy 4, get 4 free. Now you're getting another 10% off. On top of that, you don't have to pay for the windows until the year 2028. At that point, Jaden Daniels will have his new $500 million deal, hopefully. that means he would have played well next year and the year after. But the point is that if you want to finance the purchase, you don't have to pay anything for 2 years. No down payment, no monthly payments, and no interest charged. So it's not like you're going to get to 2028 and have these outsized payments because the 2 years of not paying, you were getting charged interest. No, they won't start charging you interest for 2 full years. So this is a big win if you've been thinking about new windows, the opportunity to purchase new windows at more than half the cost and not pay anything for 2 years. Window Nation gets it right. 96% of their installs require no follow-up service. They have 45,000 five-star reviews on social media rankings. They will not only come out and get the windows installed, they'll do it in a day or less. That's their promise, and they offer a lifetime warranty, so there's no risk. It starts with a no-risk, in-home, free estimate. Call them to schedule it today. 866-90-NATION. You can also go to windownation.com.
Just being around some of the talented coaches, great minds that I've been a part of growing up, from Marvin Lewis to Vance Joseph, Mike Zimmer, Lou Anaromo, and even as recently as Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. They've prepared me, and being around them, learn lessons, how to lead, how to structure their side of the ball, how to implement certain learning techniques, and finding out about the culture amongst the guys have helped guide me to where I am today.
Durante Jones, the new defensive coordinator yesterday, I thought was impressive, very comfortable for sure, and enjoyed listening to him. I thought it was interesting because, and the reason I asked Max to come back with that soundbite is he actually referred to one of those names that he mentioned a couple of other times during the press conference. Mike Zimmer's name came up multiple times. Mike Zimmer was the head coach in Minnesota. Mike Zimmer was a defensive head coach, and Mike Zimmer has been, thought of around the league for a long period of time. Remember, Zimmer was the defensive coordinator in Cincinnati under Marvin Lewis when Jay Gruden was the offensive coordinator. And Gruden got hired by Washington the same year Zimmer got hired in Minnesota. But Zimmer was always one of those guys you could tell could scheme it up defensively with the best of them. Now, he took over that Dallas team that Quinn had when he came to Washington and had a bad year in 2024 defensively with the Cowboys. It was not, it was a year that got better as the year went on, and now Zimmer's out of it. But I thought it was interesting, that Brian Flores is what we think we're getting in Durante Jones. And I bet you if we counted it up, he mentioned Zimmer's name just as much during the presser. But DJ, we have three Ds. We have Dan, we have Durante, and we have David as coordinators. We've got DQ, we've got DB, and we've got DJ. And we're going to focus on DJ right now, Durante Jones. And this was the next soundbite from the new defensive coordinator that I wanted to play. And that is, he was asked about, base defense, 4-3 or 3-4. Here's what he said.
Multiple. I think 3-4, 4-3, they're just numbers, still 7-man spacing. So I always say it's not how they line up, it's how they wind up. And so you can create that number system in numerous ways.
That's so interesting. There was a time, remember, where are they a 3-4 team or are they a 4-3 team? I mean, and it was a big deal, big conversation. Hell, when Mike Shanahan got the job here in 2010 and he had the year off or the 2 years off and he had spent, some time in Pittsburgh and other places, and he decided he's going to the 3-4. We're going to be a 3-4 team. Of course, they didn't tell big Albert Hainsworth that he was going to become a nose tackle in a 3-4. Wasn't really thrilled about that necessarily. But God, that was the rage of the day, conversation-wise, when it came to defense. Are they a base 3-4, base 4-3? That's because back then they played a lot more base defense. But over the last 10-plus years, you're in what defensive coordinators, defensive people, football people talk, they're subs, they're sub packages, much more so than you're in your base defense. I mean, we saw Seattle basically play an entire game out of their base defense 4-3 because they had 5 DBs, 6 DBs on the field. It seemed like, anyway, the majority of the game. Now, when you have DBs that can run, tackle, hit hard, close ground, and play like linebackers like Nick Emmanwori did, who was their rookie from South Carolina, and he was a difference maker for them. You can play that way. But I liked what he said because it really isn't a big deal anymore. And even 4-3-3-4, Washington last year lined up in their base 4-3, but they also lined up in, a 5-man front, and that's the way it got described a lot. But if you looked at that 5-man front, it really looked more like a 3-4 because the two ends didn't play with their hand in the dirt. They played in a 2-point stance. They played up. They were outside linebackers. And even the year before that, we've seen some 5-man, loading the box up front looks. And I don't even know how a defensive coordinator would describe that. Is that a 3-4 they're in? Is it a 5-man defensive front? It sounds like with Durante Jones, it doesn't really matter because it's not how they line up, it's how they wind up. I like that. This was him being asked about a player that this time last year, off of his all-pro season, second-team all-pro season, Frankie Louvu, I thought, man, he's the guy that could really explode. He's got talent. Like, you can see it. Can they turn him loose as an edge pass rusher more often than not? Because it's okay when he's in coverage. And he certainly is a sideline to sideline, chase him down, tackle him, player. Is he a true havoc wreaker? Maybe not at the level of the best, but he's the best we had in 2024 from that standpoint. And then this year was statistically and otherwise a step back year. But again, I'll, die on this vine. I don't know how you evaluate anything from this year. I just don't know how you evaluate much when you're just out there with different players every week and the score is out of hand and all of that. But he was asked about Frankie Louvu. Here's what he said.
Love Frankie Louvu. We watched him on tape. He's a guy that before I even got here that we would watch and put on the tape in our meeting room. I love his athleticism. He's best going downhill, getting them matched up on running backs. That's always a key. You're going to hear that a lot in terms of matchability and putting guys in advantageous positions. He's best when he can go downhill, use his athleticism, win on edges, use his speed, so time, distance, and space to encounter those matchups. And you want to put him in that situation where he's matched up on the running back. And I think running backs are one of the guys on offense that gets the least amount of reps and protections.
Yeah. I mean, Louvu's going into the final year of his deal. Let's not forget that. They have the cap space. I've wondered, going back to when we first started to have 2026 offseason conversations, which started much earlier this year than we wanted it to. But I've wondered about, in addition to Tunsil, who seems like an obvious extension, if they'll extend Frankie Louvu. Like, do you really want him if the defense changes and it's a better fit for him and he ends up having a really good year because they stay healthy and the team's better, et cetera? Do you really want him getting to unrestricted free agency? Probably not. With that said, as a linebacker designation, that's, along with like tight ends, you get away with the lower franchise tag number if in 2027 he had a great year and you didn't want him to get to unrestricted free agency. But I do wonder whether or not Frankie Louvu will be a possibility on an extension. You would theoretically be buying or extending at a point in which the team might have an advantage to do that off of the season that he had. Now, maybe for him, he's like, yeah, no, I'm a year away from unrestricted free agency. I'm willing to bet on myself. Who knows? We'll see how that works out. I am interested in that, though. He also mentioned other players. Louvu was the first one he was asked about, but then he was asked about what other players, what particular players are you excited to work with? Here's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, I had a chance to speak with quite a few players already, and they're all excited to get going, just as I am. But I think the team is filled with some versatility players, and I think they can be used in several ways. You look at a Samerstill who was very versatile coming out of college, and the things that he was able to accomplish at the University of Michigan, not only winning the championship, but the way he done it, right? And how he led those guys there. When you talk to the guys from that championship team, everyone points to him as being the leader. You look at Quan Martin, who I know evaluating him coming out, we were like, hey, is he a safety? Is he a nickel? Is he a corner? That's another guy that has versatility, and then I think when you look at Will Harris and how he's able to move in the line of scrimmage, cover tight ends on the deep halves. You look at a Jordan McGee, another guy who's on the ball, off the ball. The list goes on and on. You look at Javon Kinlaw, who can play all different levels up front. And so the talent is there. The skill set is there. It's our job with the staff to maximize those skill talent. And I'm excited to work with the staff that we have. There's going to be a lot of collaborative effort going forward and the communication. And we get a chance to teach, right? Talk about the foundation from ground up and trying to connect to these players and find out how they learn. And I think that's the biggest thing going forward. To be able to utilize the versatility, you got to figure out how do they learn. We all, as human beings, we learn differently, right? And so each player is going to fall into one of the 4 categories of learning styles. And it's our responsibility to figure out if they're visual, auditory, read and write, or if it's kinesthetic learners. And that's our job to pull that out of them.
I wonder when, professional sports started to recognize that everybody learns differently. Because I kind of feel like it wasn't that long ago where, a player was probably thought of as not brilliant, but it really was the teaching style more than the actual ability or intellect. That was interesting, just him listing the 4 buckets of how they teach and how players learn, and recognizing that to get through to these players, you have to teach them in the way that they learn the best. I wouldn't get hung up in the players that he didn't mention, Deron Payne, Bobby Wagner. Bobby's not under contract, obviously. But I would, focus in on one particular name that he mentioned. And the only reason I'm doing this is this was a name mentioned a few times when Joe Witt Jr. held his introductory press conference. Quan Martin. There was a lot of Quan Martin discussion in various places before the 2023 draft. 2023 draft, right? Quan Martin's 2023, not 2024. I believe so. Why am I blanking here? Yeah, second round pick 2023. Illinois, Quan Martin. Johnny Newton was on that team, but Johnny Newton came the next year. But Joe Witt Jr. said some of the exact same things about Quan Martin. Versatility, loved watching his tape when we were in Dallas. Really excited to coach Quan Martin. Quan Martin had up and down results. Should we say that? I think that's a nice way to put it, this year. But again, how do you really evaluate this year with all the different players and all the moving pieces that were coming in? But man, we've had now 2 consecutive defensive coordinators like what they see in Quan Martin. And I just think it's, Quan Martin, by the way, played with Witherspoon, who got drafted early, obviously, in that draft, first corner picked in that draft. We know who the second corner was picked. That would have been Emmanuel Forbes, followed by Christian Gonzalez. But Quan Martin was an intriguing prospect, I think, to a lot of defensive people who watched him on tape at Illinois, and they still feel that way now. This was Durante Jones. This was him talking, about working with players and understanding kind of how to coach them. Beyond the learning stuff that he talked about, there was more to this.
Well, a little bit of both. Every player sees themselves differently than we as coaches and you as media may see them, right? And so, as rightfully so. But that getting to know that player first starts with, I want to go back to me finding out what's their why, how they're motivated. Is it external motivation or internal motivations? That opens the lines of effective communication. And then when those lines of effective communication are open, then now we can kind of tap into what you can and cannot do based off of your strengths, and then have an open dialogue of, this is what I see that you do well. These are these are areas I think you can improve in. How do you see that? And then come to a kind of an agreement and then move forward from that point on. But I think it's definitely it's a constant open lines of communication. You got to have communication. You don't want any void, negativity kind of fills the void when it's empty, right? So we want to continue to have that effective line of communication, both player and coach. And that way we can help them grow as individuals.
All right, the last Durante Jones cut that I want to play for you, and we'll play the David Blau stuff in the next segment. Ben will jump on with us at noon. He was there yesterday asking some of these questions. We'll get his thoughts on it. But he was essentially asked if he hopes to kind of implement the aggressiveness of the Brian Flores scheme from Minnesota. Here's what he said.
Well, it's about what we do well. If we have the players and their skill sets, some of the skill sets are to be aggressive. By nature, I'm an aggressive person by nature, just in the background. And not only with Brian Flores, his aggressiveness looks a little bit different than what it may have been in the past. But really, if you think about it, there aren't many differences between him and Mike Zimmer in terms of the aggression. There's just, Zim was more third down aggression. With Flo, it's more first, second, and third down aggression, right? And it just looks differently. You know, Zim was more mug looks, whereas Flo is more all offsets. But there will be some incorporation of all that. I don't want to get too much in the X's and O's, but we will try to dictate the terms and change the math. There's a buzzword for you. But we will use that just with our adaptability and versatile approach. But I think the way the players help shape that. So it's all about players first and scheme second. And so based off what our players can do, we would do. If players can't do that, then we would do and put them in situations where they can be at their best. And so, yes, by nature, I'm an aggressive person. By nature, we want to become more aggressive in some way, shape, or form. Is that pressures, or is that just being more of attacking? Is that being more technique and fundamentals, attacking blocks, defeating blocks, tackling, and just doing the routine things routinely? That could also be seen as being aggressive as well when you're just playing technique. And so it's based off of what we have player-wise.
I mean, the best coaches we've ever had in this town are the ones that look at what they have and say, well, based on the talent I have, we're going to play this way. And if they have different talent, they might play a different way. Joe Gibbs, who was on the show yesterday, was the master of that for sure. Good stuff from Durante Jones yesterday. What about David Blau? We'll hear from him next.
I've just seen the difference it can make. You know, I've seen the difference at different stops in my career of getting to see different styles, different play callers, different innovators, and it's really important. You know, when you're creating a game plan, when you're developing players, putting them in the best position to succeed, that, you know, how important the play calling role is. So kind of like I mentioned for John, like it's as close as you can get to calling the play in the huddle and actually being the guy receiving the snap, and now developing that and helping get our group to the best collective outcome is what really excites me.
David Blau talking about the play calling that he'll be doing for the first time in his career and the significance of the play calling responsibilities to him and eventually getting those. He's had a lot of really interesting influences, including his college coach, Jeff Brom, who we referred to once or twice during the press conference. So let's get to Blau and some of the things he said. David Blau, first-time offensive coordinator, 30 years old. Durante Jones, first-time defensive coordinator in the pros. He was a defensive coordinator in college at LSU, 47 years old. David Blau's had that label on him since he became a coach as the next up-and-coming offensive guy that you're going to have to, make room for, because he's going to be an OC sooner rather than later. And here he is, sooner rather than later, as an offensive coordinator, taking over an offense with a pretty significant talent at quarterback. This was what we wanted to hear, his vision of the offense. And this is what he said when asked about it.
I think every step along the way, I've gotten to learn something. And as we go forward, our staff, our collective staff of 12 or 13 coaches, we get to kind of build it up from the studs around what Jaden and Terry and Laramie and all these guys do really well to, put them in the best position to be successful. And that's what's exciting with our staff, even pulling from all these different experiences, new coaches coming in who have, backed up Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, and coaches who have been around Drew Brees and developed young quarterbacks, and being able to pull the collective so that we can all collaborate together and make this the best possible thing is what's really stimulating right now.
He was then asked immediately, because Dan Quinn mentioned it, we're going to see more under center, the importance of being under center to new offensive coordinator David Blau is this.
It opens up, right, the, some different schemes in the run game, some things that I believe in. It opens up different play actions and keepers and getting them on the perimeter in different ways. I think there's a level of communication that happens under center. I think there's different ways to go about things. And it's something that I'm convicted about, that with his skill set, his fundamentals, the things that we absolutely loved about him when he first got here still ring true. And as we grow and develop, I think a lot of teams that you saw even playing deep into the playoffs, it was something that was a foundation of what they did. And I think, that is something that we will like to implement with him and get him in that position.
When you think about watching Caleb Williams with Ben Johnson this year, think about how many times, they had a really good run game and they had two excellent backs and they were different style backs. But my God, when Caleb Williams had play action opportunities or bootleg, or they call them quarterback keeper opportunities, just seemed like all day long. Not something necessarily that they had at times this year. And look, you need people to be able to get open, but when you got a quarterback on the edge in that bootleg after that, handoff that looks like the running back's taking it and he's coming back and it's nobody out there except for a couple of receivers and open grass, man, that's going to make it difficult on defenses. I love this style of offense. Not that Cliff's doesn't work, because it clearly does. And I thought was a good fit, especially for a young Jaden Daniels. But I'm kind of excited about watching this. This was David Blau on just being able to have spent the last 2 years working with Jaden Daniels.
That's one of the best parts for me is that we have 2 years worth of relationships already built up. There's already deposits in that bank that, we can pull from. If we're talking about, hey, what does he do well? What are we building now? A lot of those conversations have been had over the last 2 years. So it's not starting exactly from square one. And I think as much as we can, we're going to keep some continuity of the way he's called things. And then, we got to build on it. And I'm really excited to, just continue to challenge him, pull the best out of what he does and help him grow. Because, we all know as he goes, this group will go, and it's really an exciting challenge and opportunity to just get him to his best.
One of the things he said on multiple occasions, and it's the same thing Cliff said during the first 2 years, is just how easy it is to coach Jayden Daniels because he absorbs so much the first time he's given the information. You think about it, there are probably a lot of players in the NFL that need to hear it once, twice, 3 times, need to learn it the way that they best learn it, need to see it, but they've both said about him, just an incredibly quick learner. He absorbs it and understands it from the get-go. This was David Blau yesterday on his experience and what he learned from Cliff Kingsbury.
I think it's hard to ignore how much stress, no huddle, the tempo element puts on a defense. And Cliff was incredibly gracious to me, just allowing me into his brain of how he thinks, how he sees the game, and what he has seen work. And so the last 2 years were incredibly valuable for me to see how he approached game planning, how he went about, teaching concepts. And he was incredibly gracious. So I'm really thankful I got that experience with him as a player and a coach.
Back to Jayden, and Max, I want to go to 12 next. David Blau, number 12. He was asked about how Jayden himself has challenged David Blau in their relationship over the last 2 years. Here's what he said.
I kind of mentioned it. He's got an uncanny ability to just absorb anything you share with him one time. So the challenge to that is, okay, how can we stack on that the second time? Where can we take his teaching and not assume that, he's already reached his capacity to learn? How can we continue to build and take it from, when he first got here and in 2024, the 101 level classes, and now, how do we take him to every time he takes the field Sunday, he's beating people between his ears and at the highest level, just able to put our offense in the best position possible with his brain. And I think that challenge of giving him new content, new things to learn, new things to understand about playing quarterback in the NFL has been really stimulating for myself, for, the other offensive coaches, Brian Johnson, DJ Williams, Danny. When we think about what it can be for him, it's, how do we take him to that next level?
I loved that, where he's beating people. They got to get him to the point where he's beating people between his ears, because you combine that with everything else and that superstar, potential. And, as a first-year quarterback, as advanced as he was, he hasn't learned it all, and certainly didn't get enough reps in year 2. At one point, Blau mentioned, KOC and even, Goff. And Kirk, he was on the Minnesota team in 2022 where Kirk had, 8 comeback wins and the Vikings went 13-4. And think about those quarterbacks, Goff, Kirk, and those experiences that he's had. He knows those guys won between their ears, not with athleticism necessarily. And if he gets Jayden to that point, and he said over and over again, he's going to get to that point because he absorbs and is high intellect when it comes to football, that's when, he comes into his own. The first year was great. It was incredible for a first year, but there's so much more to it. That's for sure. And then lastly, there was just this question that he was asked about, getting Jayden to adapt to playing under center more. Here's what he said.
From like a 30,000 foot level, it's a, when we teach quarterback play, not to dive too far deep into it, it's simple things of taking a 7-step drop instead of taking a 5-step drop, or taking a 7-step instead of a 3. And so there's a lot, just basic fundamentals that go into that. But, even as the course of the last couple weeks of the season went on, he got more experience at it, with a little bit of a transition from our offense, with Josh playing at the end of the year. And even on, when there were scout team reps to be had, when we were working it, this has been a work in progress all the way through. So it won't be completely new to him. He's got a ton of time with coaches, that he's worked with in California to kind of grow in that area. And we'll hit the ground running on that.
Interesting, because they built up this thing about sitting him down for the last 5 games, or the last 4 weeks of the season, and how there would be some opportunity to do some things and learn. And I think we all kind of sloughed it off. But he mentioned it a couple of times, that even running scout team and getting some under center reps. Now, I thought about it. They played the Eagles twice in the last 3 weeks of the season. So if you're running scout team, you're not running much under center. They apparently took that time and made it useful. When we come back, Ben will jump on with us. And also one more from David Blau. What he said about Bill, as in Krosky Merritt. You'll hear it next. Tell you who, in looking ahead to the 2026 season, thinks that Jaden Daniels is going to win the MVP. Somebody said that. I will share that with you. before the end of this segment. Before we bring Ben on, I did want you to hear David Blau talking about the running back situation, Bill Krosky-Merritt in particular.
I think as everybody saw, all the flashes that Bill had in his rookie season, I think it's really exciting to think about what he can look like in a second year behind this offensive line. And I think, we've got one running back signed, so there will definitely be acquisitions that take place there. And, it depends exactly kind of how the room looks, but man, incredibly confident in what Bill can be in this league as a starting running back.
There you go. Bill maybe starts out depth chart number 1. I really would like to see Chris Rodriguez re-signed and him being given an opportunity. It could be a little bit of what they had in Chicago with Swift and the kid from Rutgers. Could be. Maybe that's the way David Blau will see it. Joining us right now is Ben Standig, of course, our Washington Commanders team insider on the beat. You should definitely subscribe to Ben's Substack column. Ben writes prolifically, often covers every aspect of this football team, and I consider it to be must read. I think you should too. You can follow Ben on X and get a link to Last Man Standing, his Substack, which does a phenomenal job covering this team, which is why he comes on with me 2 times a week and sometimes 3. And the sometimes being this week because we did have, coordinator day yesterday, along with the head coach. First time we've heard from him since these changes were made. What were your big takeaways?
Always appreciate the plug like that, Kevin. Very, very much appreciate it.
It's sincere. As you know, I read you every single day. And to me, it's been must read for a while now, going back to when you were at the Athletic. But anyway, continue.
Look, I think obviously this is mostly about first opportunity for obviously to speak with Durante Jones, period. David Blau, while we have gotten to talk to him a couple times here and there, is not somebody who's been on the live stream for everybody to see. And then obviously for Dan Quinn to talk about, kind of what his vision is and why he made a lot of the changes. On that front, we didn't get a lot of things said directly. Like I don't even know he mentioned Cliff Kingsbury by name at all or really referenced that too much. He just said that, it's tough when you have these jobs and you build relationships with people and they're strong and then you have to make choices and you have to decide what's best for the team and so on and so on. The obvious reasoning, though, was sitting right there. And I wrote about this, even before Kingsbury was really thought to be truly on the hot seat. And that is when they were doing the no huddle and the shotgun, they did it at such a rate that it just far exceeded anybody else in the league. And it led me to asking questions like, if this is the right offense, how come nobody else is even close? And sure enough, the one thing Dan Quinn, when he talked about the offense going forward, and David Blau as well, said, hey, it's going to be more under center. We're going to get, it's going to give us better options with the run game. We'll do a better job of marrying the run and the pass, et cetera. So that was like the big takeaway that you had to infer, I guess. There were a couple other things here and there about what Blau and Jones said that I'm sure we can get into. But, I think that we were all waiting to hear what would Quinn say about moving on from Kingsbury. Again, he didn't really say it, but the evidence is pretty obvious as to what happened there.
Yeah, he wants his offense to look like the offenses that became, winning offenses this year. Last year, 3 of the Final 4 teams were 3 of the bottom 4 under center teams. So, everything, there are lots of different ways to make it work, but he wanted to see more run game married to pass game and definitely wants to see Jaden in an offense where play action, I think play action and boot, or as they call it, QB keepers, is a much bigger part of the offering. And to be honest with you, as just an NFL fan, I think Jaden fits perfectly in that style of offense. Ironically, I don't think Marcus Mariota fits the same way in that offense. And I'm going to ask you about Marcus in a moment, because I don't think anybody asked about Marcus Mariota yesterday. But that, to me, you're correct, was the big takeaway. And we kind of guessed it. That was the reason why they decided to part ways And the interesting part is, where does Cliff end up? He ends up with Mr. Under Center, Sean McVay. They did it more than anybody. What were your first impressions of the two coordinators? We'll start with Durante Jones because he went first.
Yeah, I mean, I said to somebody there, if this was like a lecture series, just based on his demeanor, his tone, the way he commanded the room, like I'd go listen again. Whether obviously any of that leads to a better defense and winning, we'll see. But I thought he had a good presence there. I thought he had, both of the coordinators were asked essentially, give us a heads up of what you're going to run, and both of them were like, well, I've been in many different systems and we'll see. And in Jones's case, it was more of like, well, you came coming from the Brian Flores situation with a lot of blitzing and often lining up in a 3-4. So is it a base level 3-4-4-3? And his comeback to that was essentially, it's not where they line up, it's where they wind up, which is, certainly a good answer.
Yeah,
it's a good answer. And it's obviously reflection of, confusing the offense or as best you can to not always, show what you're going to do until the last second. So, I thought he was impressive in that regard. Again, and a lot of questions. And in fairness to him, I don't even know that he can give a lot of answers right now because we don't even have a clue what most of the defensive personnel is going to look like. He did say one thing that was, I think, probably all of us caught amusing, where he said that this is a pretty young group on defense, and we're all like, what?
Well, Bobby Wagner's not under contract.
Sure. But yes, yes, I guess that's technically, if we're just looking at the people who are under contract, neither is Von Miller. But so much work has to get done. Adam Peters has got a lot of work to do there on that side of the ball. So, I wasn't necessarily expecting him to give us a ton of answers, because honestly, if he even said specifically, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, that would sound like a coach who's beholden to his system more than ready to assess what is happening here. And he doesn't know. So I'm fine with kind of getting vague answers from him, but I thought in general he was a pretty good communicator with us.
Yeah, I agree with that. What about Blau?
Yeah, like I said, we've had a chance to talk to him before. He's more of a low-key guy. Doesn't not saying he doesn't like the camera, but he's not like bursting through the screen that when maybe we see. Considering he was a quarterback, right? I mean, it's not like he's just oftentimes when these coaches are getting involved, like Durante Jones, he's not growing up with a bevy of microphones in his face. David Blau was a big deal at Purdue and has, played in the NFL. But, I think he handled himself, pretty well. He talks about having a connection with Jaden Daniels. I had talked to him a ways back, and I wrote about this before the press conference, that he thinks he's got some good buy-in with Jaden. He specifically talked about this one example yesterday that he mentioned to me and I wrote about, was that early in the 2024 offseason, there was a play that he was showing to Jaden that Jaden just didn't quite seem to get at first. And over time, it took a little bit of time. Then over time, he started to see it. And it was the play that they ran against
Crowder.
The Eagles. The Crowder game-winning touchdown. And when he said it to me, this is way before the Crowder play, but once Jaden started to see it, he got a look from Jaden, like, okay, I got you. Like there was a respect that was brewing there. And obviously they've gone on to be with each other the last couple of years. And I do think, whatever Blau is, whether he turns into the next McVay or who knows, the connection with Daniels, the comfort that's there, I think it was a huge key in deciding to go in that direction ultimately, along with the fact that the Lions were showing interest and they didn't know for sure what else they could do. So there's all that. But yeah, I thought Blau was fine. I think probably also the one thing that was notable was when he again talked about the under center part, he said that hey, this is something I really believe in. He didn't just fall into the, we did this before with Cliff and I want to continue to do this. He spoke with a certain level of confidence and conviction while simultaneously saying you can't be so convicted again that you're so beholden to your system. And if I had to say one criticism of Kingsbury, I think it was sort of that no matter what was happening, he always kind of went back to what he knows the most. And again, we don't know if Blau's going to be more Ben Johnson, although I think he probably will be, or Kingsbury or Jeff Brom from Purdue or whatever. He's clearly a guy that seems to be saying, hey, I'm going to be my own guy. We're going to figure it out here, but don't assume I'm just going to, mimic one of these other guys that I've been with before, because I've got my own thoughts.
The part of the conversation about Cliff being stubborn, I'm not debating it at all. I'm not arguing with it. But at what point would he have had the opportunity to change? Like, when would it have made sense? It wouldn't have made sense in the offseason last year, right? You'd agree with that after the success they had in 24?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, again, the offense last year, was so hampered because of the injuries to, not just several people, but the two main people in Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin. And then the injuries exposed the lack of depth, which is not a coordinator issue. So I totally get that, like, there was only so much he could do. But at the same time, when we got into sort of the, during that 8-game losing streak, we all talked about it at various points. Why aren't they sticking with the run more? And, when you are the lesser talented team, one way to win is control the clock as best you can. And some of what he didn't always seem to mirror that. I know some of the numbers show that they were more.
Yeah, a lot of the numbers do. That's the irony, because it didn't feel like Washington was one of the more run-heavy teams and one of the slower pace teams in the league. But the numbers actually reflected it, which is why I think we heard from Cliff at the end of the year where he kind of subtly said, yeah, and that's why we've, run the ball and played slower then. And I think everybody's like, well, no, you don't. And no, you don't. But actually the numbers say he actually did. That's the interesting part of it. But back to, so Tommy really has hammered me. He's like, well, if Quinn wanted this, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he hire this? And I said, well, first of all, maybe he didn't want this until this year. And that's why he hired Kingsbury. And by the way, he wasn't the only one that wanted to hire Kingsbury in 2024. He's allowed to evolve or change his mind in terms of what he wants. But my point really to Tommy was, at what point this year would you have said, Cliff, I demand it. We got to go under center a lot more. I need much more play action. I need a completely different sort of philosophical approach offensively. When you didn't have your best players, you didn't know who was going to play. And then I think the most important part of that would be the actual best offense for Marcus Mariota is Cliff's offense, not under center. Marcus Mariota is not an under center quarterback. Jaden, I think, can be, and I think he'll be unbelievable in it. But I don't think that's what Marcus Mariota was, and Marcus Mariota took the most snaps of any quarterback on the team.
Yeah, look, I mean, the end of the year, right, when things were all over and Josh Johnson was playing quarterback, it felt like they were a little more conventional than we had seen at other times.
Right. With Josh.
With Josh, right. And my view of that was, in reality, they kind of understand where they are officially and that they're not trying to, Josh Johnson obviously has, been there, done that, but there's a reason why he's always in the situation where he's in, as this third string quarterback who comes in late when teams or the seasons are over. So they kind of try to not make it as, complicated, just sort of make it more basic. So it's sort of like, if that's Cliff Kingsbury's notion, then that was in there the whole time. And so the question is, why then do you, there were definitely points in the season where it's very clear that the strength of this team was the running back room, right? With Bill, Chris Rodriguez, right, Jeremy McNichols, and yet it didn't always feel like that's where he went to. And I always harped on the Chris Moore thing, and I to this day I need to find out who wanted him out there as much as it was. But I kind of think it was Kingsbury, because he wanted somebody to be that X receiver that he needs in his offense. And even though the guy was completely non-productive and inconsistent, so why not lean more into 12 and 13 personnel to take advantage of the running backs? It's in the playbook. It's not like, I'm not even saying go out of shotgun or change in the huddle. I'm just saying the game plan of what to do in a given week they may change it a little bit, and then eventually it would go back to, his sort of defaults, and even asking him at the end of the year, like, hey, what gives you the confidence that this is the way to go? And he said that, I've been using it forever, and it's always worked. And again, as you pointed out, he didn't get a head coaching job. He didn't get an OC job. He went to Sean McVay, who, it's a job. It's his friend. Sean McVay obviously is a guy that people, highly respect, but it seems like it is a Kingsbury of like, okay, fine, I need to add this wrinkle to my plans going forward here, because clearly it didn't resonate. So, again, I question why Dan Quinn, to Kingsbury's credit, nothing he did was surprising. Nothing he did. He didn't come in suggesting he was going to play rock and roll and then all of a sudden he's up there playing country. He did exactly what we all thought he would do. And at some point, Quinn was like, yeah, I guess it really isn't for me. So I think that is partly on the head coach. But at the same point, it is why I think Kingsbury, he moved on from him, because the lack of adjustment just did not seem to be there, is my read.
Let me also just, because a friend of mine texted me and said, what do you mean by pace of play? Pace of play is the stat that shows how many seconds are left on the play clock when the ball is snapped. Washington was 17th in pace of play this year in the NFL, meaning, the amount of time that went off the clock when they snapped the ball, it was the 17th most amount of time. So they were back half of the faster teams to snap the ball in the league, and they were 7th in the league in rush to pass percentage at 58-42 pass to run, but their rushing percentage, 42% this year, was 7th in the league. And remember, this year it didn't include quite the number of quarterback runs or scrambles as 2024 did. And I think that's where, like, the under center stuff's unmistakable. They were dead last and it wasn't even close. But the other stuff, Cliff would say, well, we had the 7th most rushing plays in the league. We finished 4th in the league in rushing this year. How can you say we didn't run the football? Yeah, we may have gone no huddle, but our pace of play was 17th. It's interesting because I don't think I would have ever guessed those numbers. And I don't think most of our fans would, and I don't think you would either. But with that said, Cliff is going to work for Sean. By the way, did you see the story about right now the Seattle OC job hasn't been filled with Clint Kubiak going to the Raiders? And it might be that guy Nate Scheelhaas in L.A. Apparently he's a leading candidate. If he got that job, would Cliff be the OC? It doesn't matter with Sean because Sean calls the plays, but it does matter in that every single OC under Sean has gotten a head coaching job.
Yeah, well, if that were to happen, sure, he could get it. It would mean absolutely nothing because, like you said, Sean calls the plays. But the thing is, when you hire the Sean McVay OC, it's because you can't get Sean McVay, but you're getting what he does. Is that what you're getting with Cliff Kingsbury? I don't know that. He comes in with, again, a very strong belief in what he does. Now maybe
what you saw me do as the OC is not what I'm going to do. The other guys did that, but I'm coming in with another thing. You may have heard of it. It's called No Huddle. A lot of shotgun and pistol.
Look, what he did last in 2024 was incredible. Jaden Daniels gets a ton of credit, obviously, but as we all know, there was not much like high-end talent on that side of the ball, and they did all that and happen. And yet, 1 year later, most of the league was like, not for us. So
yeah, well, again, I don't want to get into this with you because we've done it before. Under center, no doubt. No huddle, no doubt. But in terms of style, once the ball was snapped, Washington and Kansas City are very similar. Washington, Philadelphia, Cliff, Philadelphia, Cliff, Andy Reid and Kansas City, very similar. And that's the thing is that, yes, this year was, in terms of the playoff teams, I mentioned it, 12 of the 14 playoff teams were in the top half of the league of under center snaps. Now, it's not a majority under center snaps, just to be clear on this. Most teams still are in shotgun or pistol more than they're under center, but they led the league. 12 of the 14 were in the top half of the league in the number of under center snaps. But last year, 3 of the final 4 were among the bottom teams in under center snaps. So I don't know that this trend will be a given for the next 2 or 3 years. It might go back to less under center snaps next year, especially if Kansas City and Philadelphia, are amongst the most winning teams in the league. We'll see. I like my preference is under center and more of what they're going to. I actually prefer that, but I think there's a lot of ways to make it work. By the way, can I ask you one quick question about something you tweeted yesterday? Why did you tweet out shame, shame, shame? What was that in reference to?
Oh, that was in reference to me putting up my story, and it was I went to use the unlocked emoji, and somehow I went with the locked emoji and didn't realize it. So I was shaming myself for being an idiot and not letting people be aware that the story was.
Well, the
open.
reason every time I see that, like I'll ask somebody, do you know who that woman is? She played the woman who worked for the High Sparrow in Game of Thrones, but do you know who she is?
Yeah, Ted Lasso, right?
Yeah, Hannah Waddingham. Yeah, Rebecca and Ted Lasso. And she played that role in Game of Thrones. She's pretty, you know what? I think that Durante Jones would love her versatility. I think versatility would be huge. He needs more Hannah Waddinghams on defense. I guess one of the things I've thought about, I just don't know if there's an answer to this, is on defense, are we going to get somebody who gets more out of less, and how much more out of less would make a difference without how many new starters? Like, I still don't think Durante Jones, even if he's an outstanding more out of less coordinator, he needs how many starters for it to really register defensively? How many new starters?
Well, I mean, he even said sort of as much. He was asked, I think, about, bringing in the Brian Flores thing, and he said, well, you got to have the players for it. And I think we all understand the answer is they don't have that. I mean, how many do they need? I don't know. I mean, they need at least one cornerback. Maybe they need a new safety. Let's just say for argument, they stay in the defensive alignment they were in last year. Are you bringing back Bobby Wagner, or do you need another linebacker? From a defensive line perspective, it's not just the starters, it's the depth. And right now on the roster, what defensive end do they have? Dorrance Armstrong coming off the ACL, and that's kind of it that you could sit here right now and say is part of the rotation. So, I mean, they need, I don't even know. I mean, 4 to 5 starters probably at a minimum, and probably 10, right? Probably 10 guys to come in at a minimum who can, it can even just be some guys who are like in the Jordan McGee type deal, where it's just like, this guy's an athlete, this guy's fast, athletic, and sometimes if they don't know where they're going, they get there quick. So like, you need more of that, because I think that was something that really, messed with them last year, just the lack of speed. So, they need a lot. I mean, again, I think with the offense, if we just said, hey, whether it's they re-sign Debo or they draft a receiver at 7 or something, like that's kind of what if they do that, not saying it's perfect, but like, okay, we can kind of see how they can run this back. The defense just needs a lot more.
I think this upcoming free agency period is one of the most important free agency periods we've had around here in a long, long time, because they have a major talent issue, really roster wide. You've pointed out, perfectly so, the depth issues that they had coming into this year, not to mention just the wide receiver true lack of depth. And of course they got hit super hard there. But you've got to put yourself into a position where you add enough contributors / starters that you're not forced on draft night at number 7 overall to draft for need. They've got to be able to draft the best player. They need A+ players out of the draft the next few years. I hope they're able to do that. One last thing, and I'm just going to ask you real quickly, and we are out of time here, but I found it interesting that he kind of focused on Quan Martin a little bit. He mentioned a bunch of players, but talked about Quan Martin and the versatility there. It's the exact same thing Joe Witt Jr. Joe Witt Jr. was enamored with Quan Martin when he got here too, in his introductory press conference 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Quan Martin's one of those guys I think coaches really like the possibilities for him. Do you agree?
Well, look, I mean, he was a second-round pick. I don't think that, he's got a lot of skills. I just think that he was one of those guys last year that just looked confused.
I agree.
And the question was, well, was that the coaching? Was that the scheme just didn't make sense? Was he being used in ways he probably shouldn't be? He plays a lot of free safety since he's been here, but when he came into the league, I think there was more of a view that he could be more of that box safety type. So are they using him the right way, or did he, look, he's got to take responsibility for himself. So I think he is like sort of almost the poster child for and maybe Sanders still too, for like, what are we going to get out of this new defensive coordinator with regards to these players? It's not like they're not talented. It's just that it didn't work. I mean, similar to seeing Cam Curl and Emmanuel Forbes go to the Rams. Not that they were all pros, but like, okay, it wasn't like they were awful there. They were fine. Well, what can they get Quan Martin and some of these other guys on defense to be more consistent? If that's the case, then maybe they don't need as many players as they think. But that's also why I think taking Caleb Downs from Ohio State at 7 can't be ruled out, because not only is he an impact player, safety is a very
he would fill in
the air position
potentially, unless he loves Will Harris and Quan Martin. All right, I got to roll. Thanks.
Yeah, man. See ya.
Appreciate it. The person at ESPN and a former general manager who thinks Jaden Daniels will win the 2026 MVP. That's next. Yeah, you playing Chris Canty for me or not? That's what I was waiting
You said
for.
you were going to throw to it.
Oh, I thought you were going to come in with it. We are having some communication issues, producer and show host. We usually don't, though, but apparently we just did. No big deal, though. You know what? Everybody's still breathing. So ESPN did this, and everybody's been doing this week. You know, it's the look ahead to next year. Who's your early Super Bowl pick? You know, power rankings for next year. And ESPN's group of NFL experts, Matt Bowen, Jeremy Fowler, Dan Graziano, Pam Maldonado, don't know who she is, Eric Moody, Jason Reed. Is that the Jason Reed that was here? Or is that a different Jason Reed? Aaron Schatz, Ben Solak, Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL GM, Seth Walder, and Field Yates made these predictions for next year. And for next year's MVP, you know, there was some Bijan Robinson, some Caleb Williams, some Josh Allen, some Patrick Mahomes, some Lamar Jackson, some Josh Allen. Those seem to be the favorites with Mahomes. But then old Mike Tannenbaum, longtime general manager in the league, right, was with the Jets when they made it to a couple of AFC championship games and was in Miami recently, and now has been on ESPN for many years, right? I don't think he's had a true gig. Or was he part of Belichick's thing in North Carolina briefly? I forget. But he wrote his 2026 NFL MVP, Jaden Daniels, quarterback, Commanders. He writes, Daniels will rebound from an injury-plagued 2025 season and reassert himself as the top quarterback of the 2024 draft class. He stays healthy, performs well, throwing and running the ball, and makes new offensive coordinator David Blau a prime head coach candidate. Then they went to Super Bowl picks for next year. Mike Tannenbaum, Washington over Buffalo in Super Bowl 61. He writes, quarterback Jaden Daniels stays healthy next season and bounces back in a big way. He plays in every game and finishes the season by out-dueling Josh Allen and the Bills in a 45-42 shootout in LA. That's where the Super Bowl is next year, in Los Angeles. You know what? The one thing that disappoints me about the two predictions is the 45-42. That means the defense didn't improve as much as we were hoping that it improved. But if it doesn't improve a lot, Tannenbaum's going to be wrong anyway. And if they're not a great team, your quarterback's not going to win the MVP. I thought that was interesting, but he's not the only one to speak highly of Jaden Daniels in the last few days since the Super Bowls. Everybody's looking ahead to next year. This was Chris Canty. He was on First Take, the Stephen A. Smith show, and they were picking their top 5 NFC quarterbacks. Here's who Canty picked.
Number 2, Jaden Daniels. I think that what happened in 2025 with the injuries skewed what people think of him. 2024 is more representative of him. He got hurt in the second game of the season against the Green Bay Packers and was never really the same. Dealt with a major elbow dislocation late in the season. The Washington Commanders better get serious about finding a way to protect this dude so he can protect the franchise's future long-term. Jaden Daniels is a special quarterback, maybe the best running quarterback in the National Football League, and that's no slight to his ability to push the ball down the field in the passing game. Jaden Daniels, arguably the most talented quarterback in the entire conference.
So, by the way, number 1 was Stafford for everybody. You know, they were ranking the top 5 NFC quarterbacks. And the reason I think they did it, I'm just guessing, is there's been a lot of conversation after the Super Bowl on Sunday. Well, where does Sam Darnold rank? For me, really nice system quarterback. Love his toughness. Lot to like about Sam Darnold. He's not in the top 10 of quarterbacks for me. I mean, I don't put winning a Super Bowl as equal to elite quarterback. I think that quarterbacks get judged on Super Bowls. Don't get me wrong. But I just disagree with it. I understand how people tie Super Bowls to quarterback legacy. I don't see it that way in that league. It's the most dependent position on the field. It's much more applicable in basketball. rings and legacy, in my opinion. But I don't think Chris Canty's wrong. If you were, looking ahead, not looking back, obviously, if you were ranking the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFC from 2025, Jaden wouldn't be anywhere near the top 5 because he didn't play more than 4 full games. 13 of the 17 games, he was basically absent from a big part of those games or absent altogether. He only played in 4 football games start to finish, and only 3 football games out of 17 start to finish fully healthy. That's not really what I think Chris Canty was looking at. He was like, well, going into 2026, who you got? Who would you want? Stafford would be number 1 for me, assuming that, Matt Stafford's going to be healthy and he's going to be back and he's going to play next year. Going into 2026 for next season, I would take Stafford 1. Stafford was unbelievable this year. Unbelievable. And really was a couple of special teams gaffes away from being a second-time Super Bowl world champion. But number 2 for me would be Jaden Daniels. And then we can talk about Dak, Caleb, Jordan Love, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield. Sam Darnold. Darnold would not be in the conversation for 3 for me. I'd actually consider Caleb Williams for 3. I'd consider Dak for 3. I'd consider, after a rough year, but I still love the way Baker Mayfield was playing coming into this year. But that's the problem with the NFC, right? Is there is a lot of, well, I think this guy's on the rise, or I think this guy's still good, even though he didn't have a great year. I'd take Daniels too after Stafford. Is Stafford year 1, Max?
In terms of
for next year?
Yeah. So that's the thing for next year.
In the NFC.
For next year, yeah, sure, Matt Stafford. But that's the thing. Beyond that,
well, yeah,
I'm going with Jaden because
he's probably going to retire after next year.
Exactly.
If he doesn't retire this year.
So Jaden going forward, but the conversation for 2 and 3, I think Dak deserves to be in there. Like you said, Caleb deserves to be in there.
Jordan Love deserves to be in there.
Jay Love. You mentioned Baker. He was at the beginning of the season with a healthy team, and when he was healthy, he was in MVP conversation.
I know he was.
I putting him up there. But
you know who might be in the conversation of top 5 NFC quarterbacks this time next year?
Let's hear it.
Tyler Shuck.
Ooh. He looked good. He finished the season strong.
We didn't even mention Brock Purdy. He's not top 5.
No.
Stafford,
unmoved.
Daniels, Caleb, Dak. No. Love Caleb, Dak. That would be my top 5 for next year. How I'd want it. I like Jordan Love a lot. I think Jordan Love's a really good player. Man, they lost 2 heartbreakers to the Bears, didn't they? God, 2 absolute heartbreakers. Big leads, including in the postseason, and then gone. 21-3. That was the score in the playoff game, I think, right? I think it was. Something we haven't mentioned today, and I have had it on my list. The team signed Tress Way yesterday to a 1-year contract extension. That seemed obvious, I know, to everybody. But, he is now on the verge of becoming the player that will end up number 3 on the all-time games played list behind Darrell Green and Monty Coleman. During these dark years, we've had really an all-time franchise punter. I think it's kind of gone under the radar because so many of these teams that we've had have obviously been, there's been terrible teams. And look, they've been terrible teams, and he's had a lot of opportunity to actually play and punt a lot, although he didn't punt much last year, and he didn't punt much in 2015 or 2016. But, yeah, in terms of, games played, he's going to be, I think he's number 4 right now, or number 5. But I know that Darrell Green and Monty Coleman are 1-2. I'm almost positive of that. right? I think so. All right. Congrats, Tressaway. It's good to have him back. Not only is he a very good punter and one of the best in the league, he really carries himself in such a great way as sort of a quiet, I would say, not quiet because he's not got a quiet personality, but under the radar leader on this football team. When we come back, Joey Porter took a big shot at Ben Roethlisberger. I think he revealed something that not everybody knows. And Buzz Williams, Maryland's coach, basketball coach, held a press conference yesterday, and that's the first time that's happened in a while. We will talk about those things and the Super Bowl ratings when we come back. So if you have any kind of HVAC issues in your house, my recommendation is to reach out to Foley Mechanical. We had some issues 6-7 months ago. My wife and I reached out to Foley Mechanical. Dan Foley, who owns Foley Mechanical, came to the house himself, dealt with us directly. He was super impressive. They took care of the entire issue. This is one of those companies that is all owned by Dan, not a private equity firm, no big franchisee. No, he owns the company. He controls the quality from the equipment to the people he hires. His team, super sharp. They're professional. They're skilled. And it really worked out. Foley Mechanical is full service heating, air conditioning, hot water, and boilers. And they're the go-to for older homes with radiator heat, a real specialty. They work across DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and they proudly install Amana HVAC equipment. If your system needs help or you just want it done right, I promise you, call Foley Mechanical. Tell Dan I sent you, and they'll take care of it. Real quickly, so Tressaway is 5th on the list of games played with 196, but assuming that he stays healthy and he plays in the 17 games this year, he will actually pass Dave Butts, who is 7 games in front of him, and Art Monk, who is 9 games ahead of him, and he'll become number 3 on the all-time list of games played behind Darrell Green and Monty Coleman. Now, if he were to play in 2027, why not? He's a punter. He's good. He would then pass Monty Coleman and become the number 2 on the all-time games played list in Washington football, Redskins football team Commanders history. Darrell Green's, way up there, 295 games played. Tressaway is 99 games behind Darrell Green, who obviously played 20 years, all of his years here in Washington. So the Super Bowl ratings came out. The average viewers across NBC's, total platforms, 124.9 million. That's down from last year, which was 2.8 million less than last year. The Kansas City-Philadelphia game set the mark for the most watched Super Bowl ever. So this still ranks as the second most watched Super Bowl ever, and for that matter, television show ever. The Bad Bunny halftime show recorded 128.2 million people. That's down 5.3 million from Kendrick Lamar's halftime show last year, which was the most watched Super Bowl halftime show ever. There was discussion. I saw some discussion from some interesting people who said this was a number that didn't come out until late yesterday because it was a number they were trying to make sure was correct because it was a disappointing number for the NFL. There's an off-field new Nielsen methodology, and they thought the new methodology would result in the most watched game of all time, and it didn't. I'm not into the details of that, but what I would suggest is the game pretty much stunk. Now, the Philadelphia game stunk too. It was 24-0. It grew to 34-0. Remember, Philadelphia had a 34-0 lead against the Chiefs in the third quarter of last year's Super Bowl. Going back to what I talked about at the beginning of the show, I think Philadelphia's Super Bowl win last year was more impressive on defense and overall than Seattle's was. But, that was a blowout as well. But you did have Eagles, you had Mahomes. This one going into it didn't have as much juice as some previous Super Bowls. So, we don't have time to do the Buzz Williams sound. Do me a favor, just play that, what Joey Porter, Pittsburgh defensive player, said about Ben Roethlisberger having a podcast talking Steelers football.
He broke the brotherhood, then Seven definitely broke the brotherhood because,
that's the one I don't understand
the shit that Seven that we don't talk about.
I know.
is crazy. Like out of anybody should talk, he should never grab a microphone and really talk Steeler business. Yeah. Because if we talking Steeler business, his ass is foul of all foul.
But by the way, that was Joey Porter Sr., not his son, who plays for the Steelers too, because you could tell that. I could tell that in the voice. You know, over the years, I think we've learned more and more that Roethlisberger wasn't, one of the favorites of those Steeler teams among players in the locker room. That's not the first time we've heard that about him. Great player, and they haven't been the same since. But not a guy, kind of like the Seattle players felt about Russell Wilson. He's winning. They're going through the whole thing. We find out sort of after the fact. Not everybody's favorite in that locker room. All right, back tomorrow. Chris Russell's next.